The history and evolution of concrete is a fascinating journey, more rife with both human triumph and strife than I had imagined it could be. It's such a rich topic, and that when I was researching it, it quickly became evident that I wasn't going to be able to do it justice in just one presentation. So I've decided to create a 5-part series, and I'm starting today with lime. Lime is used to this day in Portland, modern Portland cement, and it spans millennia with its historical uses varying from building to agriculture to warfare. So super excited to get into it with you guys today. Just a quick note before we begin, I'm not an engineer and nothing in this presentation is professional design advice. This is a historical and educational look at lime, its chemistry, its uses across cultures, and how it shaped building practices over time. My goal here is to understand how these materials behave and not to prescribe specific construction methods. That being said, looking at how building evolved over time is really invaluable. We know that the way we build in modern times largely fails us, both in terms of healthy indoor air and in terms of longevity of the buildings. Without perspective from the past, without understanding building methods that were robust, discovered over millennia of evolved knowledge, we're foregoing a huge and available resource that can help inform our choices for healthy, durable building moving forward. I find this stuff absolutely fascinating and important, and I'm super excited to share my knowledge with you guys as I learn. So lime is one of the oldest building technologies that humanity ever developed. It was discovered independently across cultures. It was used for thousands of years, and it is the precursor to modern concrete. It was revered because it transformed stone into something workable. It protected buildings from moisture and decay, and it made durable architecture possible. Lime was respected and even feared. If it was mishandled, it could cause immense harm, and if it's understood, it could be incredibly useful. Concrete, both historical and current day, is built on lime chemistry, and so to understand concrete, we really do have to understand lime, though it's not really a chore to look into lime because lime in and of itself has an absolutely fascinating history. I like to call lime a convergence technology, and that just means that you needed to have an overlap of the right kind of stone, the right kind of raw material, and fire. You'll start with calcium carbonate-based materials, including geological ones like limestone and chalk, and biogenic ones like shells and coral. These materials are often found in former seabeds, river valleys, and coastal regions. If a region was instead dominated by granite, basalt, hard silicate rock, lime just wasn't available. If you didn't have that calcium carbonate rich material to start with, lime just simply couldn't exist. And then the other part was that the fire needed to be sustained. It wasn't just a casual campfire. It had to have a high temperature, so 850 to 1100 degrees Celsius, and long duration for several hours to several days. So how long of a duration and what temperature you needed to sustain really depended on the stone size, the type of kiln, the type of fuel, airflow. Those were all factors in how long and how hot you needed to burn in order to create lime. So interestingly, lime was discovered again and again. It was discovered independently in different places, and it evolved sometimes in conjunction and sometimes quite independently in different places as well. The earliest evidence of lime's existence was between 9,000 and 7,000 before the Common Era, BCE. That was in the Near East, the Levant, Israel, Palestine kind of area. And there is some debate from what I understand as to whether that really early evidence of lime was just accidental, like, limestone kind of meeting fire, or if it was intentional. But by 6,000 to 7,000 BCE, the intentional use of lime was quite clear. And again, lime was independently discovered many times, and it did spread through cultural exchange as well. And the Mediterranean knowledge of lime, that's 7,000 to 4,000 BCE, originated from the earliest uses in the Near East. Most scholars believe that it was discovered independently in Mesoamerica, China, and India. So in India, between 3000 and 2000 BCE, in China, between 3000 and 2000 BCE, Mesoamerica, 1500 to 500 BCE was kind of the timeline. The pattern of use in all of these places, though, the early pattern of use was quite similar everywhere. It was used as surface finishes on floors, it was used for moisture control, and later it was used structurally as well. But really, the interesting thing here is the rediscovery and how long it lasted, for how long it was actually used. And that's just a really clear signal that this is a robust and interesting technology. Across all of the different cultures, it really did start out as a surface technology, so it was added as layers to floors, walls, pits, cisterns. So lime hardens to a very durable surface. So it resists moisture damage, it suppresses biological growth because it's quite alkaline, especially to start. It bonds to earth and stone, it self-heals small cracks, and it can be reapplied and repaired indefinitely. It added hygiene, the high alkalinity made it inhospitable to microbes, mold, and pests. And it protected structures from water, so it's not waterproof, but because it's so hard, it does resist rain impact. It slows surface wear and it protects the materials behind it. Lime-based plasters absorb water more slowly than raw earth, distribute it across the surface, and then release it again via evaporation. So that's that breathability that we talk about. Lime started as a way to manage wetness and decay. It didn't start as a structural material. So lime really started out as a partner material. Earth walls and daub existed before lime. Lime was then added to protect the surfaces. For example, until lime came along, floors were dusty, they eroded easily, they were made of compacted earth or tamped clay a lot of the time, and that lime-rich surface created a more resilient and erosion-resistant layer. It was more hygienic. Also, until lime came along, walls were relatively prone to erosion from weather and wetting. The lime wash, lime plaster, or lime stabilized daub would be more resilient, more resistant to that, would be a layer that could be sacrificed and reapplied, protecting the structure beneath it. So in the old school timber frame, wattle and daub type of houses, as the one you're seeing in this illustration, the timber would provide the structure, the earth would provide mass, and the lime would provide durability. So a lime really enhanced existing systems, it didn't replace them to start. Over time, lime did evolve from just a surface treatment to holding them together. It started being incorporated into masonry. And there were some requirements for this to start happening. In order for a reliance on lime for the actual structure, you needed to have, first of all, reliable production. You needed to have the surplus fuel and labor in order to manufacture it. And you also needed to have a reason to build permanent masonries. So things like urbanization, a need for storage, defense, ritual, those were all reasons that contributed to the desire for permanent masonry. So we saw masonry evolving and starting to become reality already during Neolithic times in the Near East. In the period between 7000 and 5000 BCE, we did see some lime being mixed with earth, used in foundation bedding, so that was very early and not very widespread use of lime in a masonry type application. It was around 4000 to 3000 BCE that lime mortared masonry started to appear a little bit more widespread. It was used consistently between stones, foundation walls, retaining walls, early monumental structures. These walls were thick, used large stones, and they still relied on pre-mortar gravity logic. Mortar was really a secondary and sacrificial layer. At around 1500 BCE in the Near East, masonry traditions matured and lime mortar became well known as a repeatable material, and the technique spread widely regionally. In the Eastern Mediterranean, 1500 to 500 BCE in Greece, at this time there was an increase in stone construction and more regular block sizes. Lime mortar became common in temples, civic buildings, and fortifications. And in the Roman world, the Romans inherited knowledge of lime from the Near East and Greece. They did not invent lime masonry, but what they did do was standardize lime production, and they scaled it massively. And as we'll see in the next video on ancient concrete, they combined the lime with aggregates and pozzolans, which was a real game changer in terms of structural stability. In China, from around 500 BCE onward, lime was evolving in parallel, but also distinctly. It was added to rammed earth mixture that would improve durability, increase resistance to erosion, and reduce shrink-swell behavior in the walls that resulted. Earth still carried the load, but the lime modified the behavior of the wall itself. It was also used as mortar between bricks at that time in China. And in Mesoamerica, from around 1000 BCE onward, it was used in massive stone architecture. It was used as mortar, plaster, and stucco. Interestingly, mortar plays a subordinate role in structural stability. Walls back then were massive, often 2 to 4 feet thick, and the stones that were used were often very large, and the loads were carried almost entirely in compression through direct load paths. Lime mortar was weaker than the stone, and if it failed, the structure often remained. Mortar's job was primarily to accommodate irregularities in the units that it bound, and to distribute compressive loads evenly, and to provide shear resistance between units. I want to spend a little bit of time on lime use in England. It was used through such a large portion of its history. You can still see evidence. There are a lot of kilns still spotted throughout the countryside in the UK. And it's just such an integral part of the history and culture there. So lime was introduced at scale in Britain by the Romans, and it never fully disappeared. So that was around 1st to 4th century of the Common Era that it was brought to the United Kingdom, to the British Isles. It became the backbone of stone masonry, plaster, and timber construction over a millennium. England has deep lime knowledge even today, and it was used so widely through much of its history. While massive state-sponsored projects and the use of Roman-style concrete declined sharply after the fall of the Roman Empire, the use of lime in building continued despite reduced production. Lime continued to be used in wattle and daub infill, lime wash of houses, masonry mortars for stone and brickwork, on floors and in the walls of homes. It even had widespread use in agriculture, being used as a soil treatment to neutralize acidic soils and to create bonds with clay. There's a definite presence throughout the United Kingdom of the history of lime. You'll still find kilns in several places. That heritage culture helps to keep the knowledge alive. There are museums with restored field kilns in Yorkshire, in Derbyshire, in the Peak District, in South Wales, so dotted throughout the UK you can find evidence of this rich history of the use of lime. Just to note that outside of the Roman Empire, there was lime developing as well. So in China, lime was used with earth and brick. In India, there were lime plasters, mortars, and it was used on floors. In Mesoamerica, they had lime stucco and lime masonry, so it was definitely evolving in parallel in different parts, not only in the Roman Empire. So a bit of a note, I've already sort of touched on some of the value of lime and why it was so revered, but it lasted for millennia across cultures for very good reason. It is durable. It allowed buildings to age instead of fail. It was both self-repairing to micro cracks, and it could be repaired and reapplied indefinitely. It was moisture tolerant. While it can take in moisture, it also dries out easily when given the chance, and lime works on a small scale in huts, and it works all the way up to civic infrastructure, so highly scalable. And that basic chemistry, regardless of how big or small the project is, remains the same. It's also compatible with materials that can tolerate moisture, alkalinity, and movement, and it is incompatible with materials that depend on being sealed, rigid, or dimensionally fixed. That's why it works so well with most ancestral building materials like stone, brick, fired clay, earth materials like daub, cob, adobe, and rammed earth, as well as timber, lath, straw, hemp, and animal hair. These materials expect to get wet occasionally and to move a little and to dry again. Lime struggles more with modern materials, acrylic paints, epoxy, steel-dominated assemblies, and some metals like aluminum. Those materials rely on stiffness, tight tolerances, and permanent sealing. So in the past, it was very compatible with the materials that were used in building, less so in today's materials. So I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the chemistry and the production of lime and some of how this transformation happens and what happens with this transformation from limestone to the lime that we use in building and that was used in building. It's really interesting. I was not expecting this when I was reading through it. I was not expecting it to be quite as dramatic of a transformation. So basically you start with calcium carbonate rich materials like limestone, chalk, or shells. When that limestone is heated to roughly 900 to 1000 degrees Celsius, so that's 1650 to 1800 Fahrenheit in a kiln, the calcium carbonate converts to calcium oxide and releases a lot of carbon dioxide. So about 44% of the stone's mass is actually released as CO2. And then you end up with calcium oxide, which is quicklime. Quicklime comes out of the kiln as white or off-white lumps, and it is really friable or crumbly. When quicklime is not wet, it wants to be wet. When you add water, you get a slaking reaction. When you combine the calcium oxide, that quicklime, with water, you get calcium hydroxide and a lot of heat. The slaking reaction is extremely exothermic, with temperatures of 100 degrees Celsius or 212 degrees Fahrenheit being reached. Water can flash to a steam and it can spatter a caustic slurry. Even dry quicklime meeting sweaty skin or inhaled could be highly dangerous. And slaking accidents occurred. They caused burns, they caused blindness, they caused fires. Calcium hydroxide is the slaked lime. That's the usable building material. Once the lime is slaked, the main danger has passed. That being said, what you buy today, the calcium hydroxide, the slaked lime, is highly caustic and it should still be handled with care. So just a word of caution. If you are going to be building with lime, just take some care. Then once the slaked lime is in place in a wall, in plaster, or in mortar, and it becomes exposed to air, it undergoes carbonation. So the curing process is called carbonation. Essentially, it turns back into rock and it takes in the CO2 that it initially released. The process is slow and it is limited by air access. That's why lime cures over months or years, and thick walls carbonate from the surface inward. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on quicklime's dark side. So when I was reading about the incredible exothermic reaction that happens in the production of lime, I was struck by the fact that there must have been more nefarious uses to this material, and indeed there were. So even without a really deep understanding of the chemistry of the transformations that happen from calcium carbonate to calcium oxide to calcium hydroxide and all of that, it was obvious that there was a power to quicklime, and it was just too much to ignore. In the Middle Ages, quicklime was used in warfare. It was thrown during sieges where contact with sweat, eyes, and breath could cause severe burns, blindness, and of course, chaos. The same reaction that made lime transformative in building made it dangerous. That duality, the utility and harm, is part of why lime was so respected and feared. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time here talking about the fact that lime does actually contain heavy metals. So the raw materials containing calcium carbonate often contain trace minerals, clay minerals, silica, and iron compounds. They also often naturally contain heavy metals like mercury, arsenic, lead, and chromium. And when the CO2 is driven off, those heavy metals become concentrated. The heavy metal content in modern concrete is something that's discussed among health-conscious builders today. It is worth noticing that some of the heavy metals do originate in the lime itself. When we discuss modern Portland cement in a future video, we'll look at that in more detail. Quicklime marked a really rare moment in technology. Stone was not merely shaped, but fundamentally transformed. The process itself was understood through craft and experience rather than through chemistry, and the power it unlocked, the danger it carried, gave lime a reputation that seemed like alchemy. Stone was made unstable by fire, tamed by water, and slowly turned to stone again through air. With the rise of industrialization, modern demands were no longer met by lime. Lime was labor and skill intensive, it depended on weather and time, and it did not fit tight industrial schedules. This isn't the focus of today's presentation, but I thought I'd mention quickly, Portland cement just fit modern demands better. Speed mattered more than repairability and durability. Thin walls, fast schedules, and large crews dominated during the industrial era. There was a rapid shift from masonry with lime to Portland cement, and it happened in the 1850s to the 1880s. In that kind of industrial era, we saw this huge shift away from lime and to Portland cement. We have seen a bit of a resurgence of lime though, and there is an increasing awareness that modern building fails us in a lot of ways, and as such there's an increased interest in more ancestral ways of building, and for that reason lime is being revisited. So for the reasons we've already discussed, lime is vapor open, it allows moisture to move through it rather than it getting trapped, it tolerates getting wet, it dries readily when the conditions allow it, and it doesn't rely on perfect air sealing to perform the way that modern walls and modern structures really do. It is also low toxicity, it contains no synthetic resins, plasticizers, or solvents, and when it is recarbonated, it is essentially just reformed stone. Its high alkalinity, especially before it's entirely carbonated, inhibits mold and microbial growth, and it discourages insects and pests. There's no off-gassing once it's cured. Low tox doesn't mean risk-free, as we said before. You know, it is quite caustic when it's fresh. Also, lime is repairable. We've talked about that already. Can be patched, re-lime washed, locally repaired, and the repairs bond chemically and mechanically with the old work. It's designed to wear gradually, crack without catastrophic failure, and it can be maintained over centuries. And lime works well with biological materials the way that modern binders don't. It works really well with hemp, with straw, with wood, animal hair, and earth. There's a resurgence of lime in building with materials like hempcrete, also called hemp lime. Lime washes and lime plasters are coming back as well, and lime in stabilized rammed earth is being seen as well in modern times. As I've already alluded to, lime's story does not end with plasters and mortar. In many places, builders began using lime not just to coat and bind surfaces, but to lock together sand, gravel, and stone into a solid load-bearing mass. This was the emergence of concrete. Famously, Roman concrete incorporated pozzolans, which changed the chemistry and behavior of the concrete significantly. But in China, there was also a parallel evolution of concrete. The history of concrete is fascinating, both in terms of how the concrete helped shape society and also how society was shaped by concrete, but also in terms of how ancient forms of concrete behaved structurally and in terms of managing moisture. In the next video, we'll look at how different cultures took lime-based concrete in different directions with a focus on Roman and Chinese evolutions of concrete. The widespread adoption of lime emerged alongside the evolution of civilization. Humans learned to transform naturally occurring materials into technologies that supported durable structures and long-lasting infrastructure. Our mark on the earth endured, for better or for worse. While nothing in history is guaranteed or inevitable, lime made certain trajectories possible. Without materials that could manage moisture, bind stone, and be repaired over time, it is difficult to imagine dense, long-lived urban civilizations persisting at scale. Infrastructure shapes how people interact, how societies organize, and how they endure. I believe our built environment influences us more than we often realize, not just structurally, but socially, culturally, and biologically. I think that history shouldn't be looked at as a blueprint. I think it should be looked at as a laboratory. Some materials endured because they worked. Others disappeared because they didn't. Romanticizing the past misses the lesson, but so does ignoring it. I think that real progress happens when ancestral wisdom is viewed through modern understanding. So I'm going to continue to create educational content, solutions-oriented guidance, and provide insight into chronic illness and air quality. Do feel free to hit like, to subscribe, and to leave a comment. I love reading through all of you guys' comments. I love, like, one of the things that really keep me going with this YouTube channel is the community that's developing. It's so fascinating to me that so many people around the world are interested in healthy, ancestrally informed, but also scientifically informed building methods. And it's so encouraging to me to see all of your comments. I love interacting with them. Sometimes it takes me a minute to reply just because I'm busy, but I try my best to get to everyone's comments. So please leave them. I absolutely adore reading them and responding. So we'll see you next time when I talk about ancient forms of concrete. Can't wait to see you then. Take care.